Hi, my name is Jan Wilczek. Welcome to WolfTalk, the first ever podcast about audio programming. In this podcast, you will learn how to build your career in programming or research related to audio, meet programmers and researchers from all around the world, and learn about the intricacies of sound. The first session will serve as an introduction. When I browse through the forums all around the internet, I can see this question popping up over and over again. How do I get started with audio programming? What do I do to change sound with code? Well, I think one of the ways to answer this question was to share my path, how I got started with audio programming. And in this episode, I will try to tell you the story of how I got started in this audio programming business. The first thing that I want to say is that throughout my education in ground school, middle school, and then high school, I always had very good teachers, and especially good teachers were in mathematics. I had the pleasure of working with one of the brightest minds of the area that I was living in, and I could learn not only from great teachers, but also from great students who are passionate about mathematics. And this interest in mathematics actually led me to where I am today. But it wasn't only this. Already in my early years, I had a very strong interest in music. I was playing the piano since I was 6 years old. And then in high school, I started to learn playing the electric guitar. And especially in high school, I was very involved in music creation. There I was playing keyboards in a rock band, and I was also actively composing my own music. Actually, I was composing music from 2012, so even before high school. And I started to be interested in this process of how to mix music, how to make music sound as it sounds on CDs or on the radio. And I discovered the concept of a digital audio workstation where you can put different recordings and mix them together and ultimately obtain music. Also in 2012, I started my first compositions, which ended on my music album, which was released in 2020, which is called The Fire Will Rise. But this is not the topic of this episode. So I was, let's say, good at mathematics, and I also enjoyed music a lot. And I learned about this possibility to study in Krakow, Poland, what is called acoustic engineering. So maybe on a quick note, I was born in 1996 in Poland, and I lived all my life until I left for the university in Katowice. And for the university, I left for Krakow. And Krakow is not far from Katowice, it's around 80 kilometers in Poland. And there is a great place to study acoustics. And I started studying there acoustic engineering because primarily I wanted to combine music with mathematics. And also because I knew that they had some courses on sound engineering. So exactly how to mix music. And it was a very interesting study program, and it definitely shaped a lot of my future career. So I started there in 2015, and what is important to know about this course is that it involves courses from different areas. And one of the courses was signal processing, the follow-up was digital signal processing. And apart from that, we also had courses on programming. And these were, I believe, the most important subjects that are necessary to talk about doing audio programming. And what it concerns the programming itself, I already had programming in high school. And I must say, then in high school, I was really bad at it. And it is because there is something to programming that makes it not so easily learnable. And by this, I mean more of this algorithmic side. So I have a problem, I want to solve it with code. Now, how do I go about this? When we have a mathematical task, I don't want to oversimplify, but at school, it most often boils down to combining a few theorems that you know, a few formulas, and voila, you have the result or you have the proof. But in programming, it's not that easy. You need to build a whole array of tools that you can use to actually solve problems. And until you do that, there are some kinds of problems that will be very difficult to solve. And that was exactly my case back in high school. But also in high school, I learned the satisfaction that comes from overcoming problems related to programming. Also, of course, problems related to mathematics. But I mean especially hard problems that aren't straightforward and give you this taste of satisfaction. But anyway, I thought that I was not a good programmer, and then I went to the university. And there, it turned out that my programming skills, which I thought were quite poor, actually are enough to put me in a position of, let's say, top 10% of the students. And actually, programming on the first year was a major issue for a quite significant number of students. Because it's not easy when you're just starting out. So that was maybe something you can relate to. Maybe you also have troubles starting with programming, but believe me, with enough practice and experience, you'll overcome these problems. Okay, but back to my acoustic engineering course. So after 1 year, after talking to my friends there, we thought that, okay, we learned something, and something is not very related to what we wanted to study, because as you may realize, the first year on an engineering program is typically quite general. Like, what do we do? Like, do we continue studying this program? And a few of my friends started studying computer science in parallel. But I was a little bit scared. I was scared that I won't manage to do that, to combine two study programs. But I definitely wanted to learn programming more. So what I did, I tried to get an internship, and I was maybe too desperate, you would say, because I was ready to work without being compensated for it. And this is not something I advise others to do. Fortunately, I not end up in a position of a free internship, but I believe that in the current market, you just should be compensated if you're doing any kind of programming service, even as an intern. So basically, after 1 year, I realized that I want to be a programmer because it would give me a job in the future, most probably. And I also believe that being a music producer is not something that would give me the degree of life stability that I wanted. And please don't get me wrong, you can still make a living being an audio programmer, an audio engineer, but it requires a lot of work and a lot of dedication. I had the privilege of meeting one of the, in my opinion, best music sound engineers in the world, and they basically work 24/7. to the point where they even cannot listen to music they like. They just are constantly involved in producing, in making music for others. And they still have financial problems. So I'm not saying it's not a career path not worth following. I'm just saying that at that point I was sure that it wasn't a career path for me. And programming, on the contrary. And exactly in February 2017, I started my first, let's say, serious internship. That internship turned full-time over summer of 2017. And in September 2017, it turned to a full job. So I basically got employed by the company. And this company was called Tecmo. It's based in Krakow. It is a spin-off of my university. And it's a company that does exactly audio programming. So its main activity is in the field of speech. They have speech recognition software and also text-to-speech services. But what I was doing, I was working on Sound Toolkit. And Sound Toolkit is a sound spatialization engine for computer games. So you may think of it as you have a Unity project or an Unreal Engine project, and you use Sound Toolkit to add a three-dimensional sound to it. If you want to relate it to something, to like a similar product on the market, there is, for example, or there was back then, something that is called Steam Audio from Valve. And also, I think the most popular software that deals with audio in games is WeWise. So we may think that it was kind of this type of software that deals exactly with 3D sound. And working on this project, I was able to learn from code and from my fellow programmers how to do audio programming. And it is something incredibly valuable because you get access to a whole code base which deals with audio. So you can see how it works. You can also see what kind of issues come up while you're developing it. I think a good alternative to this are the open source repositories. And right now I know there is something called Surge Synthesizer, and they have a quite active community around this. So if you're interested in looking at the code base and having a company-like experience, I think it's a great way to start. Other advantage of this job was that I could meet people from the game industry. And I was lucky enough to meet people from a major game developer and also learn about their mindset, their type of working. And back then, something that really made me not want to work for the game industry is the reality in which the game developers, because allegedly they do something they like, they are forced to also to work 24/7, and to a point where it leads to poor quality code and basically burnout. So I knew that game programming is nothing that I would like to do personally, but audio programming started to be very interesting for me. And during working at this company, I developed the belief that this type of companies look for people who are specialized in a few areas. One of these areas is definitely programming itself, which is the programming language, maybe specific frameworks, libraries, but also programming practices like design patterns. Other area of specialty is, in this case, was sound. So digital signal processing algorithms, how to process sound, how to change sound. And this is an area which gives a great field to be an expert in, because there is just so much to learn, and there is so much knowledge and expertise necessary. So I somehow wanted to combine being an expert in sound processing, but at the same time an expert in programming, to be able to come up with efficient algorithms and then being able to implement them so that they work in real time. That was quite ambitious, I know. But at that time I thought that what I need is some more expertise in the area of computer science. And it related to lack of algorithmic knowledge. And it was a fact. I lacked knowledge on algorithms and data structures, and also knowledge on the bare metal approach to programming. So how do computers work? Because I believed back then, and I do believe still now, that in order to write efficient code, you need to know how processors work, how computers work, because the most highly optimized code uses the knowledge of the platform it is running on. For example, when it comes to vector instructions. Okay, with this mindset, I decided to start a computer science program at the same university that I was at in October 2017. And it is quite competitive program, but I could basically pass some courses with the grades that I obtained from acoustic engineering. And so at that time I had I was doing two courses, two programs at the same time, acoustic engineering and computer science. And I also had a part-time job at this company because I wanted to have this programming practice. And this was quite challenging, I must say, but I was really interested in everything I was doing. So it was a very interesting time for me, and I really did enjoy this. And I must say that at the end of the day, when, for example, at 5 p.m. I was starting programming and then sat in the office until 8 p.m. This was quite pleasant. So programming itself was quite pleasant for me, and it's still. So I know that I am able to do it for many hours throughout one day, and I still enjoy it and find it satisfying. So this led me to complete the first year of this, let's say, 2 degrees, and then do a full-time job during summer of 2018. So this proved to be quite challenging, to have 2 study programs and also a part-time job. So I decided to quit and go more into this area of learning expert things related to audio, because I saw that as long as I'm not an expert in audio, the company won't give me responsible tasks related to audio. So I wanted to be more knowledgeable in that field, and then maybe return as a person who is highly desired in the industry, because they combine the knowledge of programming and the knowledge of sound algorithms. So I wanted to focus specifically on learning. I wanted to learn more about sound. I also knew that I'm going to write my bachelor thesis in the winter semester of 2018 and 19. So I knew that it will be harder for me to combine 2 study programs and a job. So yeah, in this winter semester of 2018-19, I started working on my bachelor thesis. And my bachelor thesis was a sound synthesizer written in C++, which was integrated as a VST plugin using the Juice framework. And I say it maybe in a weird way, but I had my synthesizer programmed in a way to be separate from the JUICE library. So I wanted basically my code to compile without JUICE, and I can see that it was a very good approach, very beneficial approach in that sense, that after a few years, when I tried to compile my synthesizer with a new version of JUICE, my library still compiled, but the JUICE interface, let's say, so the plugin processor did not, because of some breaking changes. And I found it really, really hilarious that after this time my library still compiles, so it was a good choice in the design, in my opinion. But you need to understand that I was really fascinated with synthesizers because, well, I was a keyboard player, and I also loved bands like Dream Theater, Pink Floyd, Yes, where they heavily used some synthesizers. And here especially I refer to Jordan Rudess, who is my keyboard hero since I learned about Dream Theater. So when I got to acoustic engineering, there was this great professor who is called Marek Pluta, and he's extremely knowledgeable about sound synthesis and sound processing, which is related to music. So he was the first person I turned to asking, okay, how can I learn about sound synthesis? Because sound synthesis is not a part of bachelor's curriculum at acoustic engineering. And he recommended me 2 books at that time. 2 books, which was a computer music tutorial by Curtis Rhodes, and also Sound Synthesis and Sampling by Martin Russ. And I read both these books, and I got even more excited about synthesizers because, well, there were presented algorithms on how to process sound, how to generate sound. And with my C++ knowledge, I was able to implement these algorithms, and wow, now my computer was capable of doing the same thing that require expensive plugins that can be bought online. So I really wanted to learn these techniques and learn via implementation. And so the idea of writing a synthesizer for my bachelor thesis was born. And the JUICE framework was used because it was the easiest way to integrate a code into a VST plugin. And I think even now it still remains the easiest tool to integrate your audio processing code with external environment, but please don't quote me on that because obviously I don't know every available audio and plugin framework out there. So yeah, I did my bachelor thesis and it was quite a big success in my opinion. It was also praised by some awards at the faculty and at a conference. But with this in mind, I was already convinced that I need to find a place where I could study this more advanced audio algorithms. And I knew that I don't want to do room acoustics. I don't want to deal with vibration in the machines. And I don't want to be a sound engineer. I knew that I wanted to do audio processing with algorithms and code. So I wanted to find a master's program where I would learn specifically about that. And at that time, I met another great professor at the university, which was called Konrad Kowalczyk. So basically, Konrad employed me for one of his research projects, which was about speech processing and with multiple microphones. And in my case, it was about source separation. So how to separate the recordings of 2 speakers from a mixed recording, from a so-called mixture. And this was my first time in actual research where I had to read research papers and understand them, which was quite difficult for me at that time. But it was nevertheless an interesting project, and Konrad is a great person to work with and to learn from. And he basically showed me this world of various possibilities of studying. And two of the places he recommended was the Aalto University in Finland and the Friedrich Alexander University, so the University of Erlangen-Nuremberg in Germany. And it turned out that in Erlangen, in Germany, it's the home of MP3 actually, because the university cooperates very closely with the Fraunhofer Institute, where the MP3 format was born. And both of these places, Aalto and Erlangen, are heavily involved with sound processing. And both of these places are hubs for different kinds of activity related with audio. There are several professors that deal with audio there, and there are also master's courses related to audio. Out of these, I end up being accepted to what is called Advanced Signal Processing and Communications Engineering. It is a very long name, but it boils down to this advanced signal processing. So signal processing with advanced methods, and to the second part, which is communications, which I obviously did very little of because communications is not my primary interest. And what ASC enables you to do is to have very specialized courses, and these courses actually exceeded my expectations. I mean by this, I had courses in statistical signal processing. I had a course in machine learning and signal processing. And I also had audio processing laboratory and statistical signal processing laboratory. And these are courses that you cannot learn easily through reading books or through watching YouTube videos, because actually there are almost no YouTube videos on this apart from my channel WolfSound. So you may imagine that when I was doing my research in the summer semester of 2019, I felt quite alone, because for programming you can find a lot of videos and tutorials, but for these very highly specialized domains you cannot. So I was very happy with these courses. Additionally, I could also study sound synthesis, which was led by Maximilian Schäfer, and also embedded systems. So I came out with a type of knowledge that is not easily accessible and is above all a great thing to be explained by someone who knows this stuff. So you can always ask a very stupid question and they explain to you what and how. And this leads me to my next point, which is the presence of great researchers in Erlangen. And I want to especially, let's say, underline that I was happy to meet Walter Kellerman and Meinhard Müller, and also my mentor Emanuel Habetz, because I think that these people are not only great researchers, but are above all great teachers, great mentors, who are willing to share their knowledge, their expertise, and their advice, and being able to talk to them and ask them about career advice or highly specialized topics regarding audio is for me priceless. It was priceless, and I'm very thankful not only to them but to all the professors there for being open to students and always willing to help them and answer their questions. So this was a great experience. But I didn't stop there. When I started in Erlangen, when I started in Germany ASC program, I wanted to do something more. Throughout my studies, so as soon as I knew that I want to be a programmer, I started reading programming books, and I believe books are one of the best resources to learn, and for me, they are definitely one of the greatest. And I especially like the fact that I can copy a huge book, a 1,000-page book, on my e-reader and actually read this huge book when I'm on a train or on a bus. And I noticed that even the biggest books can be read in the end. So among the titles that I was interested in was Java for Android Development by Jeff Friesen, so Learn Java for Android Development, and Android 6 for Programmers by Alexander Walt, Harvey Deitel, and Paul Deitel. You need to understand that at the beginning I was heavily considering mobile development. I also read more general programming books like The Pragmatic Programmer by David Thomas and Andrew Hunt, also The Programming Pearls by John Bentley, and these were mainly driven by my question, how do I write good code, how to create good code, how to be a good programmer. As a follow-up, I read Clean Code by Robert C. Martin, and from all these books, I think the one I enjoyed the most was definitely Clean Code, and I can recommend it to anyone who's writing code, even who does this for research purposes. It's still a great book to learn from, and it helps a lot in programming. Actually, like ever since I started programming, everyone around me says that my code is incredibly clean, and I think there's still a lot of room for improvement. But this improvement now requires, of course, practice. Other book that I read was Headfirst Object-Oriented Analysis and Design. I also read quite a big part of Operating System by William Stallings, which is a great book if you want to understand operating systems, and which actually showed me how computers work internally. And I really loved this. And finally, I read the books that were, well, one of the most important ones for my programming knowledge, which was the C++ programming language by Bjarne Stroustrup. So before I had only a C++ course at my university, and of course C++ practice at the company I was working at, but the C++ programming language actually took all of my knowledge, consolidated it, and expanded in a enormous way. And now I understand why certain things are in this way that they are in C++, and also what is the, let's say, desired style of writing in C++. And the most recent book I read about programming were the Design Patterns by the Gang of Four. And this is also a great book, because as soon as you have some practice in programming, you know there are some problems and you want to know how to solve them best. And when I was reading this book, it was like, okay, so that's the best way how to solve this problem. So each day was like an epiphany when I was reading Design Patterns. Apart from reading books, I also, in the autumn of 2019, started WolfSound. And WolfSound was initially, and still is, a platform for me to share my knowledge, but also to consolidate and organize my knowledge. Everything I learn, I want to put on WolfSound so that I know that I actually know this. Because when you teach something, you learn it twice. And I highly believe it to be accurate. And I already noticed that when I was writing some articles or recording videos, I was able to identify certain gaps in my knowledge. And I think it's a great experience, and I plan to continue it further and further with more advanced topics. And finally, I was also developing my own projects, but I must admit I wasn't as heavy on this as my fellow programmers are. So of course, if you want to learn programming, practice is king, actually. But in my case, I focused more on reading because it was something that I could do ad hoc. But still, I had some smaller projects or projects that eventually ended up being my bachelor thesis, for example, that I was developing. So I studied all these courses in Erlangen, but I had also this desire to do a great master thesis, and I wanted this master thesis to be related to audio processing, maybe audio effects. Let's put it this way, for musical purposes, because what you need to understand is that in Erlangen there's a lot going on about audio, but very little when it comes to creating audio effects or audio or sound synthesizer or plugins. There is something of this, but it is not the most prominent course. And actually, I think right now there is no professor that does sound synthesis per se. So I wanted to find a place where I could, gather additional experience abroad, and also do an interesting topic in my master thesis. And again, thanks to my great mentor Emanuel Habets, I was able to get in touch with Professor Vesa Valimaki of the Acoustics Lab at Aalto University. And he actually was so kind to propose that I would cooperate with a PhD student, Alec Wright, on deep learning in audio effects. And that's exactly the topic of my master thesis, which is modeling audio effects, analog audio effects, which is also called virtual analog, using deep learning. And I must admit, it was a great experience to travel to Finland, to visit Aalto Acoustics Lab, to learn the people here, how they work, what they're interested in. And I'm very thankful, I'm deeply thankful to Alec, who is my supervisor, to Professor Valimaki, and also to Professor Habets for making this possible. And exactly in 11 days, I should graduate with the master's title, because my master thesis is almost ready. And then hopefully we'll work on publishing some of the results of the thesis, maybe extend them a little bit. And on December the 1st, I'm going back to industry. I'm starting to work at an audio programming company in Berlin. So that is my path to audio programming from the early days when I started playing the piano to where I am today when I'm doing master thesis research in deep learning and going back to industry. I hope you found it useful, and I hope you can somehow relate to this path. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me via Twitter, via email, via Facebook, via YouTube comments. I'm always happy to answer any questions regarding the topics that I discussed. One thing that I want to mention here is that if you want to learn audio programming, then please go to www.thewolfsound.com/newsletter, and please sign up for WolfSound newsletter. As I said, WolfSound is a place where I'm sharing my knowledge about audio programming, and I know from my experience what is important, what really matters, and also I try to talk about topics that are important, that are present in a lot of issues, but at the same time are not well explained on the internet or not intuitively explained in books. So from my newsletter, you will know about all of my latest publications and releases on my articles, my blog posts, my videos, and also episodes of this podcast. And you will be able to become a professional audio programmer. I hope to include more people on the show so that they can share their story and you can learn from them. But for now, please sign up for the WolfSound newsletter. You will find links to the materials that I described, above all to books, but also to the places I was talking about, on, again, www.thewolfsound.com/talk001. Once again, it's www.thewolfsound.com/talk001. I wholeheartedly thank you for listening to that first episode, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.